Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6 Degrees of Leadership podcast. My name is Ed Hendricks, and I'll be your host in this series, which is built around helping each one of us be the best leader we can be in our daily and work lives. I call the show 6 Degrees of Leadership because I hope to create a network of leaders worldwide, whether we have the official title of leadership or not, where we are all just 6 degrees from one another. In each episode, I will interview one person about what leadership means to them and how we can implement some of their everyday practices into our own lives. This episode is one that is very special to me. I had a great conversation with a person who has been a mentor and a leader for me my entire life. Ed Hendricks is the founder of Dynamic Development's Training and Leadership, and as you can tell by the name, it's also my dad. During our conversation, Ed speaks about his over 30 years of experience teaching others how to be great communicators and leaders both at work and in our personal lives. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 2 of the 6 Degrees of Leadership. I am your host, Ed Hendricks. Thank you for tuning in and joining us this week. As you heard in the intro, we have a very special guest this week. It's someone who is very special to me in particular because this person is not only the CEO and founder of Dynamic Developments, which is the company I do all my full-time work with. He's not only my direct supervisor. For the last over 35 years, he has also been known as Dad and Grandpa to my 2 little kids. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Ed Hendricks. Ed, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Brian. No better title than Grandpa. Let me just tell you that.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And Dad as well.
Yes. Thank you for throwing that in there too. Yeah. So you heard in the intro a little bit of Ed's background. But I like to hear it from you directly. As you know, I'm a big superhero fan. So instead of that question of, hey, how did you get here? I'm calling it your origin story. What is your origin story? How did you get to this point in your life where, you're the CEO, president, founder of a leadership, a training consulting company? All the wonderful things we talked about in the intro, but, what is your origin story? How did you get to where we are today?
Well, I used to work for a major communications company hate to admit it, but like 38 years ago. And I started out in sales, network sales, and I found out very quickly that was not my forte. I did not like selling, but I stuck with it. And then someone referred me to an opening for a position in an organization called Knowledge Plus within this company. And what Knowledge Plus did was just that, share knowledge with people about how to better themselves, how to advance their career, how to develop themselves and others. And I thought that that's something that I really would love to do. So I applied, and there was about 200 people that applied for just one position. And I'm very blessed and very thankful that they selected me. A gentleman named Larry Noble was my direct manager, and I'll always forever be grateful to Larry. He was not only became a good friend, but an excellent mentor as well. He pushed me to learn more about how to help people, and that's what I got educated on was organizational development and human behavior while I was at this company, and I just furthered my education through the training that I did, and from there I went to a couple of other different training organizations within this company, and I finally ended up being in charge of corporate education and training, leadership and development, and that's how I got my start in training. Now from there, I was there a little bit under 10 years, and because of my education, I had some ideas about how to develop people, not only ourselves, but others, based on a couple of things, based on their behavioral styles. We as leaders need to adapt our behavioral styles, as well as making certain that we're giving them the right structure, the right organization, the right details, the right information to succeed. We don't want to talk over them. We don't want to talk under them. We want to meet them where they're at that point. And unfortunately, I felt like the 4 walls were closing, in on me, and I wasn't able to do that because of all my other responsibilities. So I made a life decision to go out on my own, which was very risky. I have 5 children at that time, you being the oldest, but 8 years and under, and everybody told me I was crazy for doing it. But fast forward to where we're at today, and I'm very, very blessed and very thankful that I made that decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 25 years celebrated in July, I believe. Started back in July of 1997, correct?
Very good, yes. Dynamic Developments, Training and Leadership is the name of my company, of our company, and I started it this past July 1st. We celebrated 25 years. And in those 25 years, we've educated, consulted, and trained leaders from 24 different countries now.
Mm-hmm. That's again, it's worldwide training, which I think speaks to your expertise and your knowledge level of all this. And I think one of the things you just talked about that really jumped out to me that I think kind of separates people from who are leaders and people who want to be leaders is taking that risk. You said 5 kids under the age of 8. Everybody telling you don't do this. It's not the fiscally responsible thing to do. You don't know what's going to happen when you start your own company. I mean, you were in this era of being an entrepreneur wasn't as cool as it is today, if I'll say, So what was it that really made you take that risk? And, for all listeners out there that are debating whether to take that risk and to go all in, what do you have to say to them about risk taking as an entrepreneur, as a leader?
Well, I think honestly, you got to follow your heart. I mean, I had so many people at this company, including the CEO, call me, and they asked me at the time, do you know what you're doing here? We have, such a great career etched out for you. And I appreciated that. But, I also appreciated the ability to do what I did there. The training that I did showed me that I have a passion. I have a passion for being able to communicate to people in a way that makes them comfortable, but also helps them grow, as an individual, both personally and in the business environment. At that time, way back when, all major companies had their own training organizations, but the program that was developed under my tutelage there, it got to be known, and we had some very large companies coming to us now for leadership training. That I had many people ask me on the side, "Hey Ed, would you be able to do something like this for our organization or for our VPs or for our employees?" And the answer was yes, but also the answer was no. The answer was yes, I could, but I couldn't do it if I stayed there. So was it an enormous risk? Yes. And I'll tell you, I was pretty confident, the day I left, I said our goodbyes and had a lot of tears. And, when you're with a company almost 10 years, when you have to go get your box, when you're exiting the company, certain things hit me. I'm like, wow, I do have a lot of memories here. So it was a very sad day, but I said, I'm going to do this. And when I got on the elevator to go down, I was on the 60th floor of this building and downtown Chicago. And you can imagine going up and down 60 floors, no matter what time of day it is, there's no way in the world you're not going to stop, 15, 20 times. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. So this particular day, I got on the 60th floor and the doors closed. And I remember I had a panic attack. And I had all this negativity in my brain from all these people saying, you can't do it. You have 5 kids. How are you going to put food on the table? How are you going to get them educated? And that started to infiltrate my mind. Well, I took a deep breath, and, this is the first time ever that I went down all 60 floors without it stopping. And I only remember, when the elevator doors open, there was an escalator down onto Wacker Drive in Chicago. And as soon as the doors opened, I remembered having such a sense of peace about me. And I said, okay, let's go do this thing. So, the people that asked me, hey, Ed, can you do this? Can you do that? I went to them before I left and I said, if I could do these things, and I went on my own, would you contract with me? And they said, yes. And that's how I got started. So, going back to your initial question, don't give up. Don't give up. Persevere. There's going to be valleys. A lot of valleys on your journey. There's going to be a lot of peaks. You can't get too high on those peaks or too low in those valleys. And I hope people take that to heart, because I personally had to learn these things, the hard way. But there's going to be peaks and valleys. But if you know you're doing the right thing, if you know you've got a passion, and if you know what you're doing makes you happy, stick with it, persevere, keep the faith in yourself, and keep your own faith as well.
I like that, especially, and I'm a big believer in this. If you have passion for something, like you talked about, the peaks won't be as high because you know it's not always going to be great. The valleys won't be as low because you still get excited to build and to grow. And it's that idea of following your passion. So
Yes.
I think that's great advice out there for everybody that's listening is, whatever it is, find a way to follow that passion. And the good times are really good, and the bad times aren't as bad because those good times are around the corner, if you will.
Exactly, Brian. And I think it's not what is rich. You got to define rich. To me, it's not about money or possessions. Rich is having a fulfilling life. And if you're fulfilled with what it is that you're doing, you heard the old adage, you never work a day in your life. Well, there's a lot of work to make it happen, but if you're happy doing that work, it passes by quite quick.
Yes, I believe you're always having to work, but it's just, do you enjoy doing it, what you're doing? Yeah.
Yes.
And I think I want to circle back to something you talked about in the intro when you were working at the bigger company before you went on your own. You talked about this idea of behavior styles. There's lots of different ways to think about behavior styles, interpersonal styles. A lot of different 360-degree surveys you can get and get feedback on all that. But one of the things that I know you do and Dynamic Developments does so well is you link styles to motivation. When we look at, and when I work with my clients and when I talk with people today, that is probably, one of, if not the number one question I get is, how do you motivate people? How do you motivate people? And I know something that you and I have had conversations on is you got to motivate by what we call style. So I was wondering if you could talk about motivating by style or just in general. How in today's world do you motivate people to help them find their passion or to get the best out of your team members?
Well, that's a very good question, especially today. It's a really important question. I think people need to be motivated, these days more than ever. But first of all, we can't make the misassumption that what motivates us motivates other people. So when we talk about motivating people, especially in a working environment, number one, the best way to motivate people is to make certain that you're contracting what I call the appropriate leadership style to help them succeed, not based on gut instinct or not based on hearsay, but based on your observations of that individual. Not everybody needs as much structure or guidance or direction as the next person. So again, I mentioned a little bit earlier, we don't want to talk over people. We don't want to talk under people. We want to meet them where they're at. And the only way to do that is to observe the skill sets or sometimes the lack of skill sets that maybe they have based on, our expectations of the results that we want from them. So I think, that's the very first thing. Once we've identified, what do we need to do as leaders to help other people succeed and the support that they need? Once we've determined what that is, then we need to provide, both developmental and positive feedback on a consistent basis, but not based on what our behavioral style is, based on what their behavioral style is. And that's a skill set in itself. The best leaders, and I use that term very loosely, Brian, leaders, I think today, in today's world, regardless of your title, even if you don't have a title, we all need to be leaders today, more so than I've ever seen in my career. And to that point, the best leaders I've ever had the opportunity to work with in my 38-year career are the ones that I call the most versatile. They're able to take the same exact message and adapt it in a way that's conducive, not with their behavioral style, but with who they're talking to, the individual or the groups of individuals that they're talking to. That's a skill set in itself. And if you can do that, if we can give people what they need to succeed from a structural perspective, and I use structure kind of as an umbrella. Underneath structure is the amount of direction, support, time, etc. that you give to someone. If we're giving them all the right things to succeed, but we're also doing it in a way that makes them comfortable, in a way that they can understand what you're asking them to do based on their behavioral orientation. That's a leader that people are going to trust. And trust is so important today, I think, from leaders, both going back and forth to the employees, to the team members, and back to the leader. That trust, then equates into commitment. And, organizations today need commitment, to hang on to the good people, because there's so many different opportunities out there for everyone. So that's a question actually I could go on for an hour about, because I've got a passion for that. And, it kind of drives me crazy when people say, oh, Ed, you're going to love having he or she in your next workshop. They're a natural born leader. I cringe at that thought, because in my mind, there's no such thing. Just the little things I just talked about, and I didn't get into great depth with this, just the little things about identifying, their abilities, or sometimes their lack of abilities, and putting the right leadership twist to what you need to do with them, but then communicating it in a way that makes them comfortable. Nobody's natural at that. That takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of consistency as well.
Absolutely. And lots of good stuff to break down there. One thing that you said reminded me, I had Kyle Wilcomb on, a good friend of mine, was on our first episode, and he brought up something really similar. And it's this idea of, it's not the team member having to adjust to me, I have to adjust to the team member's needs. It's this idea of the platinum rule, right? Do unto others as they would like to be done unto. It's kind of the opposite of the golden rule that everybody knows, but we're episode 2 of the 6 Degrees of Leadership, and both guests have made it a point to talk about that. So I think that just goes to show how important it is we as leaders are the ones that need to adjust. We need to be versatile. We can't have that expectation the other way around.
You're right there, Brian. And, I'm a very, very firm believer in the golden rule. Do unto others, in the way that you would like them to do unto you. And, a lot of leaders misread that, I think, because, they read it where, okay, I'm going to treat others the way I like to be treated. Right. But, the way I like to be treated may be very, very different than the way you want to be treated. So I've often gotten asked over the years, hey, Ed, how can we really apply the golden rule? I know it's scriptural, and it sounds great and everything, but how do we do it? Well, what, we've got to really focus on, what does it really mean? And I think what it really means is, like you mentioned, Brian, it's not about doing unto others the way I would like to be done unto. How do I actually make that a reality? By me doing unto others the way that they would like, want, need, expect to be done unto. That's an awesome, influential leader, someone that can do that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that leads into that second piece, that I wanted to touch on, you were talking about, is when it comes to motivation, when it comes to developing our team members, I hear it all the time. Well, I didn't get that because my boss didn't like me. Yeah. Well, my supervisor or my leader doesn't like me. It's unfair. They have favorites. So I hear that quite a bit. As a basketball coach, as a leader myself, that's not necessarily the case. A lot of it, though, what I think it can come down to, and I would love if you could talk more about this, is it's based on our observations. I think as leaders, we need to focus more on our observations of, I believe you said demonstrated abilities or inabilities, versus how I feel about you doing the work. So I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Absolutely. You're right on with that. It is based on our observations, not on any prejudices, hearsay, or anything, like that. But I think before we even talk about the observations, we need to make certain that everybody, that we're responsible for understands, our methodologies of how we're going to develop them as an individual, how we're going to develop the group as a team. There should be no surprises. There should be no surprises with regards to what are the tools we're going to be using to develop you, both developmental and also positive. If you notice, I didn't use the word negative there. I used the word developmental tools. And, developmental tools should really be positive, and positive tools should really be developmental. So I think the key is to make certain that everybody on the entire team knows, what is the way that you're going to be leading us. And I think the key to let everyone know is we're going to be leading you as an individual. Because you're all different. Mm-hmm. How am I going to be leading you, Brian? I don't know. It's going to be different than the way I'm going to lead, the next person. and it's going to be based on your abilities. There's some abilities where you may be my rock star, so I'm going to motivate you a little bit differently. 2 hours later, you might be working on a responsibility where it's brand new to you. So you're going to need a lot more of my time. So I need to be versatile and giving you that time and that guidance and direction. So when it comes to, people saying they're playing favorites, they like this person more than the next person. As a leader, sure, it's great to want to be liked and respected and everything, but you got to learn that. Or excuse me, you've got to earn that. But secondly, you've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent. As a leader, I hate to say it, but you do have to kind of draw a line in the sand. And that line in the sand is, okay, if I've taken on the challenge of trying to develop you, here's how I'm going to develop each and every one of you. Now, if you do that and you show them the tools that you're going to be using, both from a positive and a developmental perspective, there's other tools that we can utilize to determine what do we need to do, to get them to that next level. But more importantly, by them understanding the tools, they understand what do they need to do to help get them to that very next level. So, when they understand the developmental cycle and how we all develop, then we've got a mutual, agreement with what needs to be done going forward. So, that agreement is very, very critical because now there's more buy-in. And, but you also have to perform to get to that next level. But it's up to us as leaders to share with each individual what areas do they need to improve upon to get their performance to a level where they can get to that next position if they so choose to do so.
Mm-hmm. And I think the key to everything you just said there, to me, that jumped out was consistency.
Yes.
And I think that's where that idea of favorites come from. Well, if I'm giving Ed you feedback all the time, whether it's positive and or developmental, but I'm giving, Jane Smith no feedback, developmental or positive, it's going to come off as Ed's my favorite because I'm giving him feedback.
Right.
Instead of displaying or showing that, consistently giving feedback to everybody on our team.
Brian, you bring up a very good point. From a behavioral perspective, I could take 20 different people and walk into a room with 100 different people, and they're going to gravitate towards people that are similar to them, even if they don't know them. They're going to gravitate towards them because there's something about either others individuals' words, tone, or body language that matches theirs. So there's a cohesiveness there right away. No different for leaders. Leaders, yeah, you might have that nice title attached to your name, but you're also, a human being. We got to be careful with that, because I don't care how educated or tenured people are. If, you're my leader and I see you paying all the attention to people over here and not much to me, jealousy happens, anger happens, emotions happen. And, unfortunately, too often, we kind of do that with our best people. We kind of put them out there on an island because they're easy. They're easy to lead. They're easy to count on. But those best people need to understand, again, going back to something I said earlier, all of the ways that we're going to help develop you, because there should be no question. They know that I'm spending time with people over here because they need my time. But also we need to know as leaders, sometimes a simple thank you goes a long way with our rock stars on our team, because unfortunately, many times they feel the least appreciated. And I think we need to show appreciation differently, but at every different developmental level.
Can you talk about that really quick? That I see that a lot in different organizations that I work with, or with different teams that I've worked with. And that idea, every time I say that, people get taken aback. The people that are least appreciated are usually our top performers. Now, just on face value, that sounds like, what are you talking about? That's crazy talk. What do you mean? They're the best. They know we love them, right? We give them all these things to do. We're showing them. We're delegating to them. So talk about where that comes in, or where you've seen that come in, where it's actually the opposite, where our top performers tend to be the least appreciated, the ones that are feeling the least amount of gratitude coming back towards them for all the wonderful work that they're doing.
Brian, you used a great word there, delegating. Now, there's a fine line, however, between delegating something to someone and dumping on someone. And the top performers, many times that feel the least appreciated are the ones that feel like they're being dumped on. Now, you might be the only person I can delegate a particular responsibility or task to, but leaders need to understand what you already have on your plate. So they need to, at the very least, take a look at what's on your plate and reprioritize what's on your plate. And you would appreciate that because, you being the top performer, you want to do a top performers type of job and have that kind of outcome. We need to give you the opportunity and the time to be able to do that. So true organizational development, and I know we can't do this all the time, but true organizational development means me taking a look at your plate, either reprioritizing what's on your plate, putting something off and maybe till the next quarter, or better yet, how about if I take something off of your plate and try to mentor and guide the next person in line, so you're not the only one that knows how to take on that particular responsibility. So at each developmental level, boy, we need to motivate people, but we need to motivate them differently. Now, you had mentioned the top performers. I mentioned earlier, a simple thank you or a simple, acknowledgement of, hey, I realize the hours that you put in the last quarter, please know that does not, get overlooked at all. And I know it took away time from your family, but, without your efforts, without the time that you put in, we would not have been so successful. Many times that's all it takes with them, the acknowledgement and the empathy that you can show with regards to the efforts they're putting in.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And everything you're talking about now reminds me of something that you created. Again, I've taught this in the past, so I know the dynamic leadership model. I'd love if you could just kind of touch on that for a minute here. So for those of you who don't know, Ed's company, Dynamic Developments, their leadership model they teach was actually created by Ed. It's known as the dynamic leadership model. We can put some links in the show notes so you can kind of take a look at it, see what we're talking about here. But Ed, from your perspective, what made you? Because you weren't always teaching that. I think it's only been the last 7 or 8 years where the dynamic leadership model really has come into its own. So what made you say, I can adjust this to make it better? And what makes that model different than other models that you've seen or that you used in the past?
Really good question, Brian. And, doing this for so many years, I've probably taught probably close to every leadership model out there. So what I was teaching, wasn't my own. It wasn't my own. It was someone else's, but I put my own twist to it. And my own twist was overlaying behavior onto whatever model. And what I found over the years, I've always struggled. I've always struggled with leadership models, thinking, are the participants really going to use the tools when they leave? And my main struggle was, I believe that most leadership models out there are too theoretical or too conceptual. So you might have a great facilitator, teaching you the theories and the concepts. But if you walk out of that workshop or that training session or that meeting and you're scratching your head and saying, this is great stuff, but how do I use it? Honestly, we just wasted everybody's time. And that's, one of the reasons I left this organization way back when that I did, the communications companies, because I had my own ideas of, it's great to have, these leadership tools, but, I came up with the idea that we have to apply them differently. We have to apply every tool differently based on each individual that we're communicating with. And that's how I came up with the idea. How can we do this? I wanted to create just one model to take work off of people's plates. So many times when you go to training, when you get out of the training program, there's more work on your plates. It actually took me 4 years to develop this model because that's not what I wanted. I wanted leaders to be able to take work off of their plates by utilizing the right tools at the right time with the right people to develop them. Because if we can do that, it's going to take work off of our plates. And us as leaders, we still need to develop as well. We're not perfect. Just because we have that title attached to our names, we're not perfect. So when it comes to, taking a look at leadership, I think as a whole, and then taking a look at the model, it took me so long because I was frustrated. I thought I had it. I thought I had the model. I thought I had the tools to go along with implementing the model. But then I'd wake up in the middle of the evening and go, that's not it. That's not going to work. So many iterations of the model, and what I wanted to create, and it finally dawned on me, and the light bulb went off. I wanted to create a model that we can assess one's development based on how they behave while carrying out each responsibility that we're asking them to carry out. Very, very unique. So it took me that long to determine what are typical behaviors at each performance level. Now, I've identified, I believe there's 4 different, what I call performance levels. I just simply call them performance level 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 being your rock stars, 1's, being your new people or new to a role or responsibility. And, as you take a look at the model, with the model, in each stage of one's development, we have a behavioral description of what an individual typically will look like, at this developmental stage. And it's pretty darn accurate, based on how people behave. If we can do that for leaders, that takes the guesswork out of, or helps take the guesswork out of assessing where they're at. But that's still not enough. So I also wanted to capture in the model, okay, based on, again, my observations of you and the behaviors you exhibit while carrying out this responsibility, based on those, what is the best leadership approach I need to use? So I was able to link a particular leadership style to each developmental area. However, that still wasn't enough, because I'll give you for instance, the leadership style for what I call performance level 1, a new person, is what I call the teach style of leadership. These people need the most of your time, the most structure, the most guidance, etc. And, when it comes to them, we need to do something different with them than we do for everyone else. So if I know that based on my observations of you, that you're at performance level 1, I need to utilize the teach style of leadership, which, that in itself, requires more time than I think what we have today. What does that entail, the teach style of leadership? But what's critical, Brian, is that I may need to have to use the teach style of leadership with 4 different people who have 4 different interpersonal styles. And it's up to me that the style that I need to utilize, teach, doesn't change. But what needs to change then is my communication approach of using the teach style of leadership, not based on me, but again, based on that other person. That's an excellent leader, someone that can do that. But boy, does that take, a lot of observations. It takes a lot of time. And what we tried to do with this model and what we've accomplished, not only with the model, but with the tools as addendums to the model to help you apply the model, is just that. We've taken the guesswork out of assessing. We've taken the guesswork out of the leadership approach. And we've taken the guesswork out of what tools do we need to use at each stage. And that's what took so long. So that's what I've always had a passion for. Didn't have the time with 5 kids to actually do it. I know that's a rotten excuse, not saying that you don't have the time. But it took me a while to really, really put it together, to validate everything that is in the model, and to validate, all the different tools that are in the model, to make certain that, yes, they do work. And they do work anywhere you take them, and they work quite easily once you understand that.
And I like what you said, too. I think that's one of my favorite things looking at the dynamic leadership model that you created is, at first, it looks like a lot of work. I'll be very blunt and honest. And then all of a sudden you learn it and you go through it and you get these, what I like to refer to as practical tools. And all of a sudden, as you're developing people, you actually find more and more time. Yeah. You find yourself with more free time. And again, it's one of those things where, like, when you first look at it without knowing, you're like, how the heck am I going to accomplish all of this? But then as you break it down, it's, well, I don't have to do everything right now, because that's not what that team member needs, or that's not what that individual needs. So I'm going to spend my time giving you what you actually need and using this specific tool for that. So big kudos to you. I think that's a huge plus when you look at something, from a leadership model perspective, because there's so many out there. But the dynamic leadership one is one that, does actually save you time in the long run when you put it into practice.
Yeah, and the whole key, I think, behind it, Brian, once you do learn it, when you leave the workshops or the training, you can apply it immediately. And that was one of my goals, is to apply it immediately, but also to develop a model that's really practical and realistic. The theory and concept, they're all important to understand, but it's even more important to understand how do I apply theory and concept in a realistic way, not just from a educational standpoint, but from an individual standpoint.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And I guess that kind of leads me into this next piece. So, and you mentioned, I think 2 or 3 times already today, there's no such thing as a natural born leader. Well, we have older leaders tuning in, we have younger leaders tuning in. And as you already mentioned too, leadership today is a little bit different than it has been in the past, just with outside circumstances, with stress levels continuing to rise. So I'm just wondering, for everybody out there that's looking to keep learning, to keep growing, what advice can you give to leaders out here in 2022, 2023? What resources, do you have any resources that people can look into, just so that they can continually to develop themselves outside of, listening to our podcast once a week?
Okay, that was a 2-part question. I'm going to answer the second part first. All right.
Okay, perfect.
Resources. One of the resources, it's been around for a while, but I think it's probably going to be coming back. It's a book called "Who Moved My Cheese" by Spencer Johnson. And it's a very, very unique way of looking, number one, at how change occurs, but even more importantly, how do we individually approach change? And, the whole world's been turned upside down in the last 2.5 years, so change is occurring more rapidly than I've ever seen it occur before. So, we as leaders, but also we as individuals need to understand, okay, how am I reacting to the change? Am I being negative? Because my negativity is not only going to impact me, it's going to impact others. It's going to impact, my coworkers, but even worse than that, it's going to affect my home life, as well, because regardless, we bring work home, too many times, both mentally and physically, and that does have, a negative impact. So that's one of the resources. The other resource is a book by Tom Rath. It's called Strength Finders, and it's a book based on Don Clifton. Don Clifton is the Strength Finders psychology behind it. He developed the psychology behind it. And what Strength Finders does is it really helps you identify what are my areas of strength. And if I can identify my areas of strength, I have to ask myself, well, if that's my areas of strength, does that make me happy? These areas of strength. And if it makes me happy, what can I do to go about going for it? So I highly recommend, both of those resources, not only for yourself, but it also helps us identify, strengths and abilities, or sometimes, inabilities of other people on our team as well.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That ties it back into what you originally said too, is it's finding that passion. Hey, and how does passion tie in with what I'm good at?
Yes.
And where's that linkage? I think that's great. So then how about that first part of the question? What advice can you give to people, or what thing can you let them know? Like, hey, keep working at this, keep doing this, whatever it might be.
Well, I think there's 2 things, Brian, I'd like to share that are I really have a passion for, and I really think it's something that people should carry with them every day. I've coined a couple of phrases, in the leadership world, and I'll just share with you a couple that are most near and dear to my heart. One is, we all have a choice. We all have a choice of the organizational or personal environment, that we're a part of, through the way that we behave while we're in those environments. That's one thing to remember, as soon as you walk in the door, and I don't care what your title is, people are keying off of you. They're keying off your words, your tone, your body language, your demeanor, which leads into my second, and I think the most important quote is, the behavior you exhibit as a leader becomes the acceptable behavior of your followers and those that you interact with on a daily basis. Now that's going to take time to infiltrate one's brain, because that's not only in the working environment, that's in your home environment, as well. And boy, it's more true today than ever before. So if people can think about that on a daily basis before they walk into the working environment, after they're done working, before they open that garage door to walk into the home environment to greet, their significant others and or their children, we'd all be better off, I think.
I love those both, and I feel like I've heard them for 35 years, probably because I have been hearing them for 35 years. But something that you said, and maybe it was just how you said it today, really stuck out to me more than it has before, is you have a choice. You get to choose every day. Am I going to be a positive influence in this world, or am I going to be a negative influence? You have a choice when you show up to work. What type of example, leading to your second quote, the behavior you exhibit as a leader becomes the acceptable behavior. You can choose what type of behavior you're going to exhibit. So, and I hear this quite a lot, is, well, it just happens that. No, it doesn't. There are so many times that we as leaders, we as individuals, whether we have a leadership title or not, we can choose how we behave, our words, tone, body language. We choose how we react to a situation. So I don't want everyone to say, well, what about when this bad thing happens? You're right. And there are times where life gets hard, or when something at work is not going well. But I think that choice is something people forget, is that we can choose how we react to any given situation at any given time.
Man, oh man, I couldn't agree with that more. When I started the company, I wish, when I started on my journey, I knew there was going to be peaks and valleys. I knew it, but I wish someone would have shared with me, and nobody could do this. You have to experience them yourself, but I hope this helps other people. Sometimes those valleys are very difficult. I'll give you for instance, in 2008, when, the recession hit, my wife, your mom, and I didn't even know how, we were going to put food on the table. We were living, paycheck to paycheck. We have 5 kids we're trying to put through private school. In addition to, raising 5 kids, it's quite costly. And we literally, for years, were living paycheck to paycheck. That was a valley for me. But what I'm going to share with people is be persistent. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, keep your faith, keep your faith in God, and keep your faith in yourself. I started to lose my faith, not in God, but I started to lose my faith in myself. My wife, her name is Cindy, my wife, your mom, by the way. I told her one day, I said, this is too stressful. I think I just got done updating my resume, and I said, I think I'm going to have to go back into the business world and work for someone. And she said, absolutely not. She said, I know this is what God wants you to do. But, sometimes our timing isn't his timing. So I'm very thankful for that valley. It was horrible. It was a horrible, almost 7 years, of stress and laying up at night thinking, where's the next piece of business going to come from? But based on my wife's, suggestion to me, I did keep the faith in myself. And I said, she is right. What we're doing is helping people. And that's what I want to do. Here we are, celebrating 25 years this past July. I think for everyone, you're right. We do have a choice. We can choose to be versatile, or we can choose not to be versatile. However, when you've got tools that we can teach you to be versatile, it just makes life so much easier. It takes the frustration out of so many things, takes the emotion out of so many things. So my question to people is, when you know the tools and you know the results that you're getting, you're going to get from those tools, why wouldn't you want to be versatile? And then lastly, I'm a firm believer in wherever we're at in our life right now is where we're meant to be. So keep the faith. You're meant to be there. So we're all human beings. We've got stuff going on at home. We've got stuff going on at work. But you know what? If you want to advance your life, if you want to advance your career, people do look at us. They look at our behaviors. How does he or she act in these conflicting situations, in these stressful situations? And the good leaders, it's not that they just suck it up, but they take a step back. And there's a methodology that I developed. I call it the R-Cube process, and what it stands for is to regroup our thoughts, reorganize our words, tone, and body language, and then redeliver our message. Not based on us, but based on that other person. So if we do have things going on in our lives, personally or business-wise, yeah, it's okay to feel rotten. I'm not telling you to feel good about bad things that are happening, but regroup those thoughts. Regroup those thoughts, because, man, can you ever have a positive or a very negative impact on someone as soon as you walk through the work doors or as soon as you walk through the home doors? So regroup those thoughts and ask yourself, okay, how can I be more positive? How can I make certain we're going to have more of a positive outcome? What do I need to do to adapt my words, tone, and body language for the person that I'm going to be interacting with, to communicate with them in a way, that's going to be positive? That was a long-winded response, but I think you can see that you really hit a hot button with me there.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to the idea of choice, right? You mentioned R-cubing, so if however we can remove that emotion, if it's meditation, if it's box breathing, if it's 4-2-4 breathing, whatever it is, that's a choice. It all goes back to that choice that we can make. We all know how to eat healthy at this point in time. We can choose to do it, or we can choose not to. We all know working out is better for us in the long term. We can choose to work out. We can choose not to work out. What you're hearing from someone who has done this close to your entire life, Ed, is you're telling people right now, you have a choice in the type of, not just leader you want to be, but in the type of person, the type of energy you want to put out there in the world. So now you can do it, or you don't have to. But it's up to you. Like, you take that internal drive and say, yeah, I'm going to choose to do this every day, or choose not to, but know that's what's going to, affect you both personally and professionally, what that choice is.
Absolutely. And, if you really take a look, if everyone would really take a look at, their lives, their upbringing, other people's upbringings, and, their lives, it's very true. The behavior we exhibit inside the household becomes the acceptable behavior outside of the household, as well. I believe people are good. Deep down, everybody is good. And I think everybody wants to have a positive impact, not only for themselves, but on their family and really in the world. I really think that. I truly think that down deeply. So, we can make it happen. You can make that happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's a magical potion, but, the tools that are available will help you at the very least step back and think twice, before something, comes out of that mouth. And, ask ourselves, every time we have an interaction with someone, Brian, self-talk gets triggered in our brain. And we got to ask ourselves, with what's jumbling around in this brain right now, if I say what I really want to say, is it going to make the situation better, or is it going to make it worse? And if it's going to make it worse, okay. It's up to us to be versatile. What can I do? What can I do? And I've often gotten asked, what is the very best way to regroup, reorganize words, tone, and body language, and redeliver your message? And, my suggestion is if possible, and I know it's not always possible, is to R-cube what I like to say is prior to. What that means is identify, there's certain people that we know, they push our buttons. Family members, people at work, that could push our buttons. Well, R-cube prior to meeting with those individuals. There's certain situations. So identify, who are those people? What are those situations? And maybe in the car on your way into work, R-cube, and before you walk through that door, because again, people are keying off of us.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So much great stuff, Ed. I appreciate this. Yes, thank you. And before I let you go, we got to ask you the two questions we always wrap up with. So, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time out of your day to jump in and join us, and to really just lay some great foundations for people out there that were listening. But two questions. One is, how can people get in contact with you? Is email, LinkedIn, websites, what's the best way for people to either get in touch with you directly, or if they want to bring dynamic developments in and they want to have a discussion around what can your company do for them, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, one way to reach out to me personally is through my email, and that is my name is Ed Hendricks, and it's at Dynamic, DYNAMIC, Developments, DEVELOPMENTS with an S on the end of it, Developments .net. Again, it's Ed Hendricks at dynamicdevelopments.net, and our website is www.dynamicdevelopments.net. If you'd like to see, what it is we do, or have, any questions, you can get in contact with us that way. And we're also on LinkedIn as well. So, any one of those resources will put you in touch with either myself or someone within the organization.
Great. So make sure you check that out. The second, or the last question, I should say, we are called 6 Degrees of Leadership because we're all about building a leadership community here. So there's obviously people that that have had a positive impact on you as a leader, or that you've trained, that you've seen grow as a leader. So I have to ask, who are 2 people that have either impacted you or are great leaders that I can reach out to selfishly here and bring them on to the podcast to get all of their knowledge as well?
Wow, that's a very good question, Brian. I think 2 that kind of stand out in my mind right now is a gentleman named Bill Abington. Bill is a global executive, and he actually has been through the training himself, is a firm believer in the training, and a great influencer on other people.
That's wonderful. Thank you again so much, Ed, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And then stay tuned next week. We'll have another guest here on the 6 Degrees of Leadership. For Ed Hendricks, I am Brian Hendricks. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Hi again, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you all picked up a tidbit or 2 from our episode. Now, please do me a favor and like, comment, and subscribe to this podcast. Each of those helps build our community of leaders. I appreciate you all. See you next time on 6 Degrees of Leadership.